Patricia, let me just tell you a little bit about Patricia. Actually, this is her book that primarily we're focusing on, Beyond Jesus. I had the wonderful opportunity of being able to read this in January when I was on retreat in Costa Rica. Each evening, we went back to our rooms by ourselves, and so it was easy within a week to get through her book. Just want to read for you a little bit about who she is, based on about a half-page paragraph in the back of her book. It says, Patricia Pearce was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. After graduating from the University of Colorado, she served in the Peace Corps, volunteer in the Andes of Ecuador. Her experiences there set her on a path of spiritual exploration that took her into the ordained ministry. And for 17 years, she served as a Presbyterian pastor. But in 2002, following the death of a close friend, she experienced a spiritual awakening that led her beyond the bounds of conventional Christian belief. She resigned from the parish ministry in 2010 to embark on a vocation of writing, speaking, and teaching. She lives with her spouse in Philadelphia. Learn more about her work and download from her website, which it's just patriciapearce.com. Also want to let you know that we have decided that 100% of the receipts from today's program will go to the Ukraine refugee relief program. We usually do 20% or 50%, but this time we think it's appropriate that it be 100% to help the folks out there. Okay, very good. So, hi, Patricia.
Hey, John.
It's so nice having some time with you.
Yeah, it's
It really is.
really great. I've been looking forward to this.
I am too. As I said, although our paths have been very, very different, there's also been some interesting overlaps, particularly in terms of our relationship with the church and in relationship with the Course in Miracles and relationship with this wonderful experience that we all like to talk about called mystical experiences, and how that has opened us up and changed us. And so let's begin, if we can, just with you telling a little bit about the story about what's in this book and then beyond this book, because this book ends, in 2012?
Yep.
Is that right? Right. So that was 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it was.
How did that happen? Right?
That hadn't occurred to me. Wow.
Yeah, mine was 20 years ago. It's like, what? How did that happen?
It's astonishing.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And thanks, John, for having me on today.
Sure.
My book, let me just first speak to the title, because
good.
The title of this book, Beyond Jesus, I'm going to have to jump ahead in my story kind of to the end and just say something about that, because in 2010, I was driving back to my mother's ash scattering. And at that point, I had left the church. And this was actually 2011, I was driving back. And I had left the church at that point, and I didn't know what was ahead. And I was driving through the interstate in Ohio, and I just got this download that I would write a book called Beyond Jesus that would talk about how ego consciousness had shaped Christian belief.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just sat with that for a while, and I didn't know, what form that would take, but it seemed to me that telling my story would be the most effective way of bringing people along on that journey to that realization of how deeply the consciousness of ego had shaped Christian doctrine and the Christian worldview. So the catalyzing event really in my life, the thing that really set my life on a very different trajectory, was in 2001 with the death of a very close friend of mine. And this was someone I had met in seminary, and we had become very close friends. It was just that, how sometimes you meet someone and you just know, like, this person, I'm supposed to know this person. Mm-hmm. And it was that kind of immediate connection. And she died following a transplant for a bone marrow transplant for aplastic anemia. And her death really hit me hard. And there was something, and I think grief can often do this to us. It it's like it opens up a moment in our lives. It opens up a portal for us where we can get really clear
Yeah.
about things.
Yeah.
And in the wake of her death, I just felt really clear that I did not want to live my life on the surface. And I sensed that there was something about my existence that I had never known. And I just had this clear resolve to know that, whatever that is. And I was going through the grieving process, and a year after her death, I went on spiritual retreat, as I have done every year in February, every year since then. So it's been 20 retreats that I've gone on. And that first year, I reiterated my desire to open up to whatever this consciousness is. And it was a few months after that I started experiencing just all of these impossible synchronicities, these things that were just happening that didn't seem possible. And I felt in that moment like I had stepped into a magical realism novel. Like, these things don't happen.
Yeah.
These just don't happen.
Yeah.
And I felt like my worldview was cracking apart. And I went to the woods where I had gone sort of on weekly pilgrimage just to open myself up to it. And I went to this rock that I sometimes go to meditate. And I just said, it's just like, I don't know what's happening, but I just want to surrender to it. And I don't know what to do. And all that occurred to me to do was to start giving thanks for the people in my life. Because somehow I had this sense that whatever was happening in that moment was happening because of my web of relationships. Mm-hmm. And so I just started giving thanks, saying, thank you for this person. Thank you for that person. And as soon as I started naming the names, I had this immediate flash of knowing that I am not a separate self. It was this moment of absolute recognition that the separate self that I always experienced myself to be did not exist. Mm-hmm. It was a fabrication of my mind.
Wow.
And in that moment, these waves of energy just began cascading through my body. Whoa. It was a very Kundalini kind of physical experience. Yeah. Very intense. And I was sobbing, and I was feeling like something was being released and dying at some deep level of my being at the same time that something was being born. And it was very profound. And I was on this rock and I was sobbing, and, tears were just falling at my feet. And after a while, the energy subsided. And it had been raining during this time. It had been raining. And as the energy began to subside, the rain began to let up. And when I came out of that experience, I saw a world that I had never seen before. I saw the sentience of everything. I saw that everything is alive, that everything is numinous, that everything is interconnected, that everything is love. And I was filled with this profound hope for the earth. And I knew that if enough of us can give ourselves over to this love, that the earth can be healed.
Wow.
And so I was in this state of consciousness, seeing the world as I had never seen it before, knowing myself as I had never known myself before, mm-hmm. Experiencing myself to be in love. Everything is just like in love.
Yeah.
So I continued in this heightened state of consciousness for a few days. And during that time, I was getting they felt like downloads of information about how, we are in a story, and it's just, again, synchronicities continued, and the whole thing culminated. It's like I felt as though I was in a particle accelerator, and things were just accelerating until finally the last vestige of the illusion flew apart in this amazing moment where I recognized that we are in a dream.
Wow.
And at that moment of recognition that we are in a dream, then all this intensity began to subside. It was just like this clear knowing that we are in a dream and that we are playing out a story, that the story itself is a form of trance, and that it's time for us to transform story, or planetary story.
Wow.
And as I was in the thick of this, and I recognized that what I was experiencing was what Jesus always talked about as the realm of God, or to use that language, kingdom of God, that this state of consciousness is the realm of God. And I could see how that idea of the separate self that I had seen to be an illusion had in fact shaped our perceptions of Jesus. We had set Jesus apart, that dualistic mind had set him apart as some sort of different kind of human, separate from us, different from us. We are separate from God. We are separate from the earth. So that very thing that had been revealed to me to be an illusion was the thing that had formed the foundation of Christian belief. Well, obviously, this put me in a difficult situation in regards to my vocation as a pastor, because I was in a position where, I think it's one thing if you are sitting in the pew of a church, and you can kind of, take what works for you and leave what doesn't. But in the role of pastor, you're expected to represent this doctrinal system.
Right.
And it was no longer true for me. And for many years, I tried to hold these worlds together, and I tried to find a way that I could integrate them. I tried to find a way where I could maybe reframe, Christianity for myself. I tried really hard, John. I tried so hard because, for one thing, I had a magnificent congregation that I just dearly loved, a very progressive congregation in Philadelphia. They'd been on the forefront of so many progressive movements and very, social justice oriented, and just besides that, just dear folks. So this is my beloved spiritual community, and so it, I didn't want to leave.
Of course.
So I tried to hang on, and I went on all these sort of pilgrimages. I took a pilgrimage to England and to Scotland. I thought, well, maybe if I go to Iona in Scotland, where they practice a Celtic form of Christianity, maybe that can be what I can hang on to. So I took a trip to Iona, and even there, I didn't find what I needed. And I took a trip to Israel, which actually I was invited to go on, and it's like these experiences just ended up alienating me more and more, and eventually,
the kingdom of heaven is inside you.
Say again?
I said the kingdom of heaven is inside you.
Yeah, exactly. And I really wanted somehow to make the institution work for me, and it just became more and more clear that it wouldn't, and it couldn't. It has its own architecture of belief. So anyway, in 2009, I made yet another pilgrimage back to California, to the place where Patricia had died, to the place, that was the name of my friend, Tricia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The place where she had died, where we had scattered her ashes. I went back to the seminary that we had both graduated from, and where I also had met my husband. So I made this pilgrimage back. And when I was there, it was very clear to me. I was at the seminary, and I was walking a labyrinth there that had been installed since our graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Walking the labyrinth has also been an important part of my spiritual practice. And as I walked that labyrinth, and I got to the middle of the labyrinth, and I looked up at the bell tower of the chapel, where we always had our chapel services. And I felt this blessing for me in my path. I'll use that word. And I felt that something was completed, that some chapter of my life was done. And when I came back to Philadelphia to resume my responsibilities as a pastor, again, there were all these synchronicities. I walked in, well, first of all, I couldn't get my office door open. The key wouldn't work. I'd had this key for 12 years, no problems ever, but I'm trying to open the door. I can't get my office door open. When I finally do, jiggle the lock and get my door open, what I witness inside my office is many of my books have been removed from my bookshelves. They're stacked on the floor. All of these portraits of former pastors of the church, dating back to the 1800s, had been pulled out from this corner where they've been in storage, and they're leaning up against the sofa. And I open the door, and it looks like my office is being packed up. And all of these old, former pastors are there saying, "Come join us." And I realized I had this recognition. Oh, it's time for me to go.
Oh my gosh.
And there was something in me that just was done with that role, and I couldn't reactivate it. It's like this chasm opened up between me and the responsibilities of the pastorate. And so at that same time that I realized it was time for me to leave the church and this beloved spiritual community, I also learned that my mother was in hospice, and she had cancer. It had recurred. And so I was faced with these two very monumental losses in my life at the same time, the death of my mother and the death of, my mother church.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really rough time. And I stayed with my mother some to accompany her, and then I resigned. And anyway, so it was in the aftermath of all of that I was driving back then to participate in my mother's ash scattering, that I got this knowing that I would write this book called Beyond Jesus, to talk about how ego consciousness had shaped Christian belief. So there's a lot more that I could say about my story.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even touch on, my time in Ecuador as a Peace Corps volunteer in the 80s, and my experiences in doing nonviolent civil disobedience, for which I spent a week in prison when the U.S. launched the invasion of Iraq. And of course, all those things factor in, but that's kind of the key points, I guess, of the constellation that I'll offer this time.
Right. So could you then share with us a little bit about how you came to A Course in Miracles? Because most of the folks who are with us are students of the Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So shortly after I had resigned from the church, well, first of all, I had before I left the church, I was trying to write a very serious book, and I was going to call it Quantum Christianity, because I'd become interested in quantum physics, and I'd become interested in how quantum physics, it seemed to me, was uncovering some of what I thought Jesus was getting at. So I tried really hard to write this serious book, and I'd done a sermon series called Quantum Christianity. So I thought I have kind of the material there. I can just kind of rework it. But it was just going nowhere. And I was so like, it just felt laborious to me. So finally it's like, all right, I'm just gonna like, whatever. I'm just gonna write whatever wants to come through. I'm gonna let go of control. So I let it go. And I just sat down to start writing. And the words that came forth, much to my surprise, were "once upon a no time." And it launched into this like fable that was very much about what I had come to understand as a result of my own mystical experiences, and touched on exactly what I've been trying to communicate about ego and us being in a dream and what it means when someone awakens in the dream. So I wrote this book, and it's called No One in Island. Well, someone, and I don't even know how this happened, but someone up in Connecticut got a hold of this. I think I put it on my website or something. And he asked me to come up and speak to a group in his church in Connecticut who had read this little story. And so we went out to dinner before the group met, and he leaned across the restaurant booth and he said, sort of in this hushed voice, speaking of my story, he said, "It sounds a lot like A Course in Miracles."
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh, I've never read the course." And to be honest, I didn't have any desire to read A Course in Miracles. I had my own preconceptions, although I knew nothing about it. But I had my own preconceptions about it.
Yes, right.
Like, it's weird, it's like weird, and I'm not weird, so that's not for me.
Right.
So anyway, okay, that was my first like little nudge. And then in 2014, so this is probably a couple years later, I was on retreat to mark the anniversary of my friend Patricia's death. I was at a hermitage up at Medical Mission Sisters has their global headquarters outside of Philadelphia. And they have these little hermitages that you can use. So I was there, and I was getting ready for my retreat. And I was moving some books off of one shelf so that I could put my books up. And as I'm moving these books off, they tumble to the floor. And among them is, as I'm picking them up, among them is this booklet, Introduction to A Course in Miracles. So I'm like, all right. So I sat down and I started reading it. And I was blown away.
If I can interrupt for a second, I can tell you how many times I've heard this story. And multiple times it fell off a shelf. I was dusting the bookcase and I bought it 15 years ago, couldn't get into it. I've actually had people, more than one, several people tell me it actually like jumped off the shelf, which that sounds like magic now. That's not miracles, but the fact that it, as I say, it comes to each of us at the time it's supposed to come to us. And boy, was it the right time for you.
It was absolutely the right time for me. And the reason that it blew me away, John, was it was confirming the things that I had experienced. 10 years, 12 years before that.
Especially the dream part, right? I mean, that's really...
And that's the thing. When I got to that, it's like that we're in a dream. It's like,
right.
Oh.
Right.
Because that was really, at the time when I was having those experiences, I didn't know what to do with them. And I didn't have any guidance or, any way to help me understand. Like that was another big challenge. So it was extremely comforting to come upon this resource that was confirming what I had come to see. And so when I got back from my retreat, obviously I ordered the course and I started reading. So Beyond Jesus ends, the time period that book covers ends in 2012. And it was 2014 then that I was introduced to the course.
Could you explain to us a little bit more about what you mean by ego consciousness getting a hold of the church? I mean, I'm in agreement with you, but how do you see that and how that was manifest and your answer?
Yeah. And I don't, there's no, obviously, as we know, if we're studying the course and are practitioners of that, and there's no blame here. It's
no.
People were interpreting Jesus' life and teachings through the lens of their present consciousness.
Sure.
They were making sense of it in the way that it could make sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I use the term ego consciousness, really what I'm talking about is the dualistic consciousness, the consciousness, the separateness, the paradigm of separateness. So if we are in that dualistic mind, then we look at Jesus and we see something amazing and other than us.
Yes. Right.
And that's when we end up projecting our divine nature onto him. So he becomes the only Son of God.
Right.
He becomes, the savior that we need for our depraved, our depraved essence as fallen humanity. So there's all of this projection that the egoic mind does, and it happened with Jesus. So he becomes the object of our projection of our own true nature.
Right.
And there are probably lots of ways that I could talk about that, but mostly I'll leave it at that.
So what it really means it is our awakening to the realization that you are the Christ. No, I'm the Christ, that we're the Christ.
Exactly.
Christ is one mind, and that we all very much a part of that mind.
Exactly. To know ourselves as Jesus knew himself to be Christ.
Right.
That is what we are. That's it. That is what we are. That's our essence.
Right.
Yeah.
So he awoke to that. I always sort of see that as happening in the wilderness story. I mean, that's really the real temptation is, and he comes out of that.
Yeah.
And then begins the ministry. There's no ministry till after that event, but
that's the way I see it too. And actually that's the story in the Gospels that I was really turning to when I was in the midst of this very tumultuous awakening experience.
Right.
That story of him being baptized, coming up out of the river,
right,
and seeing heaven and earth. The veil of separateness was torn apart.
Right.
And he knew himself to be completely and absolutely beloved.
Right.
He knew that was who he was, and that anything else was an illusion, including Rome, the empire, all of that was an illusion.
Right.
So, and then, he had to undergo this process of facing those egoic temptations in himself.
Right.
That I think is so key, because we don't go from that kind of experience to then going out and proselytizing. There's this experience of purification that we undergo, because otherwise we're probably the ego is going to take that awakening experience and gonna make a lot of hay out of that and make itself very special.
Like create bishops and archbishops.
Yeah. I've had this experience. Doesn't this make me special?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, do you know that quote from Meister Eckhart, what you said, that your experience of, you were giving thank you for this friend and that friend? Do you know that quote from Meister? if all you ever, if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, that's enough.
That's enough. That's enough.
And that's what got you started.
Absolutely. It was being in this pure state of gratitude. And as I look back at that experience, I realized that what I was doing in that moment, I already had a recognition of the fundamental nature of reality being relationship. Like there was something in me that knew enough to know that what I was experiencing somehow had to do with relationships.
The whole course is about relationship. It's about, letting go of all of our projections onto our others and engaging in the process of forgiveness of ourselves, A, and then B, for whatever else we think might have somebody else did to us that never happened. And it's a wonderful awakening. And it doesn't have to happen with the course. I mean, the course is a book. It's a facilitator. It helps the process, especially the workbook lessons, helps us to maintain and sustain that consciousness, that awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also like to add that it also doesn't need to have some sort of dramatic.
Oh, goodness, no.
I had sometimes, in some ways that makes it more difficult to have an experience like that.
Why?
Because first of all, it's very disorienting.
Oh.
It's very jarring to the system.
Yeah.
It's not gentle.
No.
It kind of reminds me, John, of what you talk about in your book.
Yeah.
About the dynamite, opening up the portal with dynamite.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like that,
No, it doesn't.
It can be gentle and gradual, like the dawn, like the sun coming up. Like these gentle realizations of who we are.
That's when it comes as dynamite that it shakes you, and then you really sort of see it, but you sort of stand back and you look at it, and it's a dream, but it's also a nightmare.
Absolutely.
And that part isn't fun to see.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially in terms of our own contribution to the creation of the nightmare.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and the implications of this recognition that we're in a dream. Yeah. And you don't change a dream by trying to change the dream.
Right.
You don't change the dream by trying to, go out there and fix it.
You can't manipulate it.
The dream is here. You change a dream by changing the mind that's dreaming. That's right. And so more and more, it's like this, again, the retracting the projections, right? And coming to recognize, as you know, having read my book, dreams have played a very figural role.
Oh, yeah.
In my own spirit.
A lot.
Yeah. And I had a dream recently, when I was on retreat, just this past month, where there's this demonstration that's happening. And I don't know if it's around climate change or what, but there are a bunch of people who are walking, engaged in some kind of a, not protest, but demonstration of some kind. And I'm walking in the other direction, and I recognize that I want to get to the headwaters of the climate crisis, where it originates in consciousness. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I'm about, get to the headwaters of this nightmare that we see playing out on the earth, because that's where it starts. And to recognize that what that means is for me to travel to my own headwaters, into my, into the depths of my own consciousness. Because that's where it starts. That's my fundamental responsibility. That's my work to do.
So I say the kingdom of heaven is inside you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the Course says that it modifies it because it says the kingdom of heaven is you.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not just inside you. You are it. It is you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this is wonderful. The other thing that I really liked what you just said was we're talking about the Jesus story, the baptism and all that. The Course in Miracles, principle number 7, you're probably familiar with it because it's right there in the beginning. It's such a clear one. Miracles, everyone's right, but purification is necessary first.
Yeah.
First we got to clean house. First we got to get the junk out before we can see. How can you say there's a beam in your eye when there's a speck in your eye when there's a beam in your own eye?
Exactly.
Yeah. Take that beam out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly. Very interesting line. And then you will see clearly how this helps somebody else. So that's what we're doing. I mean, that's the process that we're all engaged in.
Absolutely.
We're cleaning out our own vision, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as the Course, helps us to do that, absolutely free of judgment.
Oh, yes.
So often we can clean our house with a lot of judgment. Yeah. And then we're not really cleaning house. We're using that same energy that doesn't, right. The whole thing of forgiveness and recognizing that, that's the other thing about dreams is we're not punished for what we have dreamed. When we wake up in the morning, we've had a dream where we did something that I was like, oh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those are tough ones.
And that's the other thing, when you mentioned about, how the Course came to me, and I told you the story of the introduction that I came upon, not only was it confirming what I understood, that we're in a dream, but it was taking it was helping me see the full implications of that, especially how it plays out in terms of forgiveness. I hadn't gone to that step in my own awareness. But if this is a dream, we are not judged for what we dream because it's not happening in reality. And I had not made that leap of understanding.
Right.
And that's where the Course really wow.
Yeah. I love the part of your mystical experience too, that where you started seeing the love.
Yeah.
That was happening for everyone. I mean, that's beautiful when you get to that place.
Yeah.
And the connectivity.
Yes.
And the fact that there's just one mind, the fact that there's just one of us here.
Right.
I mean, if you see that, then you can't engage in projection. I mean, you can't, or you're projecting to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're not quite halfway through, but I think that we're kind of at a juncture now. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can do our 10-minute break at this point.
Sure.
The hush of heaven holds my heart today. The hush of heaven holds my heart today.
So here we are back. Welcome. And now we have an opportunity to share with each other and with Patricia. Bud is going to, first of all, tell us a little bit about what he's seeing going on in the chat room. And then we'll move over to having dialogue with Patricia. Go ahead, Bud.
Here we have a couple of really wonderful, warm questions. So one of them, Ted brought to the forefront by saying, this is a very moving account, and it leads him to ask, how does this play in regard to healing the crisis of the war in Ukraine?
Super good question, Patricia.
Yeah, it is. It's, I think it's a question a lot of us are sitting with right now. And, when I was on, again, retreat one year, I like to go to Ghost Ranch in northern New Mexico, and they have this fabulous, gorgeous labyrinth outdoors that is right in front of this beautiful red cliff. And I love to walk it when I'm there. And one day I was walking the labyrinth without any question that I was holding. I was just open. And I was walking the labyrinth, and I, hear the words here. I hear these words, release all concept of enemy. And it was, I hadn't been thinking about enemies, but so it sort of startled me. Release all concept of enemy. And then it went on and it said, there are no enemies. There are only those who do not know who they are.
Right.
And so for me, one of the foundational things as we look at what's happening in our nightmare in Ukraine, the Ukrainian nightmare is, first of all, to release all concept of enemy and to recognize that the whole idea of enemy is egoic and dualistic. And so for me, when I as an individual cannot stop what's happening in Ukraine. I do, however, believe that this can be an invitation for all of us
Yes.
to extend love in whatever ways we can.
Right.
And we're doing that today by donating all of the proceeds from the registrations towards refugee relief. After we're off the call, I'm going to our the Ukrainian League of Philadelphia, that's only a couple blocks from our house, where they're having a fundraising bake sale. And we're going to go buy some pierogies and probably give a substantial donation on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
This can be an opportunity for us to express love in wildly creative ways. And I think, John, this might have been in one of your books where you quoted Helen Keller, who said, the world is full of suffering and it's also full of the overcoming of suffering.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so, to hold everything that's happening for me in my heart, to hold it in that reality of love, and to do whatever I can do to help alleviate the suffering. That's what I feel called to. John, you can chime in however you want to.
Well, I'm really totally in agreement with you. It's important to think about how this transforms me and how I see things, how I don't see enemies. At the same time that I don't see enemies, let's say I'm an adult and I walk into a room and there's a couple of kids that are fighting and one's beating the other one up, I will stop it.
Yeah.
I mean, I will step forward and I say, no, this is not right. You can't be beating up this other child. So something has to happen where we don't. There's a really important. The fact is, it's just a section that we've been going through in the course right now. If you began the first of the year, in defenselessness, my safety lies. Right. So, but in that defenselessness, I think we should understand that on an ego level, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't defend your body. If somebody walks up to you on the street and starts attacking your body, you will do everything in your power to stop them. For one very simple reason. Within the context of the dream, you think you're a body. I mean, it certainly looks like this thing is real, So let's not deny. Of course, they do not deny the seeming reality of the body. So here it is within the context of the dream. So we have to do what we can I think we are doing what we can by, helping with the refugee relief. But what has to change in me also in terms of the way I see? That's very important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I would also encourage people I, for a long time, have been very interested in nonviolence and
Correct.
the power of nonviolence and what nonviolence can actually do in the world. And I think we all, look to the example of Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. And I would recommend people go to, there's the Metta Center for Nonviolence. It's METTA. Michael Nagler is the person who founded that, and he wrote a book called The Search for a Nonviolent Future. I believe that nonviolence is the way for us to move forward as a human society. And so that's, something that I try to cultivate in my own life.
Yeah, how can I be nonviolent? In my mind.
Yes, exactly.
to start with.
To begin it within the mind and then let that be expressed in the actions. Yeah.
Right. there's a line, of course, I could see peace instead of this. There's a basic teaching in the course. Well, how do we see peace and when we're standing in the middle of a war? Right? It's possible. I mean, it's possible to know the kingdom of heaven is inside, and it's possible to know it's a dream, and it's possible to know that it's insanity, but that doesn't mean we don't feel a need to correct not only the way we see, but to extend beyond that if we can.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Right. What else, bud?
Well, since we're talking about the war, Ted added another comment. Is there a place for giving miracles in responding to the war?
You want to start?
I'd like you to start.
Well, the giving of the miracle, I think, starts with giving love, regardless, at all times and in all places, regardless of whatever it is that's going on. So it's very hard to know how one loves Putin, but there's a transcendent dimension that you can get to. How does God see Putin, right? I mean, God sees Putin as a child of God. Maybe at the moment, a kind of chaotic thing that seems to be going on within the context of the world, but that's not true in eternity, which I think is hard for us to understand. It's hard for us to understand not true in eternity. In eternity, we are all one, even this part of us that seems to be a disease element within the context of the human consciousness. But how do we love our way around that? That's that's the real challenge.
Yeah.
But that's going really deep. The course is really deep. You go all the way down. It's not about killing anybody, doing anything like that. But again, as I said earlier, it doesn't mean that we don't let murderers murder. We don't let rapists rape. We don't let thieves steal.
Yeah.
And somehow or another, we have to do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say also, in addition to that, in answer to the question for me, well, you already touched on this, John, but the miracle is really, the change of perception. And
Right.
for me to experience the miracle and be the miracle is for me to perceive, as you're saying, all of the players in this saga, all of them in their original innocence, in their essential innocence, in their essential goodness.
Right.
And, I do believe that if enough of us, because consciousness is one, right? If enough of us are holding a different state of consciousness, that has an effect on the dream. Because we are changing the mind that's dreaming. And as we step out of this narrative of violence, out of this narrative of enemy, out of this narrative of other, as we ourselves step out of that and hold a different state of consciousness,
right,
we are influencing the dream, because the dream is arising from the mind.
Right. So the question then becomes, how do we love in this situation?
Exactly.
Right. I had an experience when I was in seminary. I actually roomed with a fellow who later became a serial killer, not a divinity student. He just died quite recently, but I got to know him before any of that had ever happened in his life, and I got to know him as this kind of innocent person who wound up doing some pretty horrific things in his life. But with the ability to sort of reach back and see that little boy that was in there, that child that was in there, who was horribly hurt when he was 7 years old. His mother committed suicide, which is what led to his insanity, I think. I mean, it was a major contributing factor, right? And it takes a lot to sometimes reach back to that.
Yeah.
But, the question is, how does God see this situation?
Right.
How does God see? Remember the bombing in Boston? Was it several years ago now?
The marathon bombing, yeah.
I was at a church the very next day. That was on a Friday, Saturday. I think it wasn't on a Sunday. I was speaking at a church somewhere. And I did an impromptu sermon. tossed out whatever I had planned. And what I did instead was the topic was the boy in the boat. Remember, he was found in a boat and it was covered up in a boat. And what is the boy in the boat? What is he going? How does God see the boy in the boat? Right? What's God's response to the boy in the boat? But here we got this this is, if we're measuring things in degrees, it's way beyond that, but it's not. It's the same kind of a thing. Right? Then the question is, how do we see the boy in the boat? I know a lot of people are after him for big time.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, it's okay.
Well, that same event, the Boston Marathon bombing, as soon as I heard of it, I went down to the place where I meditate and downstairs, and I sat down on the cushion, and I was intending to pray for the people of Boston and the victims, and as soon as I began, I felt like something was just taking over my body and my mind that wanted to hold the perpetrators. Like there was this very strong desire to pray for the perpetrators, and I just let this power use me, because as we know, everything is either an expression of love or a cry for love, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You got more, Bud, before we go to the hands up?
I just want to add a comment here because this is so pertinent in world events. Chapter 23 of the course, section 4, is all about the battle. And it's a section I try to read every year. We're clearly instructed to rise above the battleground of the ego.
Right.
And what's startling to me as I really dug into that concept years ago and continue to go back and explore it is how the concept of attack is defined and how we attack without realizing it. As an example, not forgiving, which I know I have done, is the same as attack. And that's a bit of a zinger.
Yeah.
And further, and again, remember, when we're looking at the notion of the illusion, all attack is the same as murder. It's equated very directly in the course. So even an unconscious attack, wishing that the other person is dead, is what I'm doing. That's really what I'm suggesting in my unconscious mind, in my egoic thinking of the world. If I can't forgive, then that's what I'm offering. And so what does that mean when we attack ourselves by not forgiving our own thoughts, our own words, our own deeds?
Yeah.
Right?
That's the place to start, isn't it?
Yes. And it really has to start here. It isn't really about all these things that occur on the surface of our life when we're looking at all of this notion of whatever's happening in the world. And there's always something. There's never nothing in this world. This world is a learning institution.
Yeah.
It all has to come back to us. How do I feel about that? What miracle can I perform in my life? That's how I extend love to everyone. We're all one. When I extend love to even myself or others, I'm adding to the love of the world. And the best way we can love ourselves is to forgive ourselves. If I can't forgive another, it's because there's some aspect of me I can't forgive. That's where we start. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah, you're right. That's where we start. And how do we start there? In even really small ways, right?
So here's a couple of questions. And we do have some people with their hands up. And so I want to get to those as well in a couple of minutes, but we still have a few more questions. So Jean wants to know, how do we align for the extension of peace and love for all? And do you have any tips from the awareness that this is a dream? And how can we apply that, especially if we haven't had that notion of, like both of you talked about, your awakening experiences, right? So how can I move forward as if, so that I could extend peace and love?
Can you read the first part of that again? How do we align
for the extension of peace and love for all?
Align,
A-L-I-G-N, align.
Yeah. So I want to skip to the end of that around, if when we haven't had the experience of this aha, that this is a dream, let
Mm.
me just say that I did have that experience, but that doesn't mean that I stayed there. You know, it's sort of like the alarm clock goes off and it's like, oh, and then, you know, you hit the snooze button and then you're back in the dream.
But one thing I might add there, you don't forget that you had that
But
experience.
you don't forget that you've had the experience. That's
And because you had the experience, that tells you you could go back to it. You could, it's a memory that you want to hold on to.
That's very true.
And come back to. And
Right. That's
it
the
remains in the
difference.
background.
That is the difference. That is
Right.
the difference.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if you haven't had the recognition at that kind of immediate revelatory way that this is a dream, people practice lucid dreaming. They practice to become lucid. And when I go to sleep at night, I don't practice lucid dreaming, but some people do. And there are practices that you can do, like you look at your palm. Every time you see your palm during the day, you say to yourself, this is a dream. This is a dream. And then when you're in a dream and you look at your palm, you go, oh, this is a dream. So there are ways to practice lucidity. But I think really it all comes down to, so this is a dream. How do we want to be in this dream? Whether we're aware of it or not, how do we want to be in it? How do we want to express love? How do we want to let our being express itself in love? So there's this back and forth of knowing it's a dream and not believing that. And I know that both of those things play out in my own psyche. Like part of me knows that this is a dream and another part of me is still in the dream. So it does go back and forth. But
And sometimes too, I find, Patricia, you have to just let the dream be the dream.
yeah, and not fight it. That's the thing that keeps us locked in the dream, I think, more than anything, is fighting against it.
Right. So let's say you're with somebody else who's being very disagreeable with you. And so you just let them be who they are. And, you don't interfere. You don't try to fix it or change it. And, that would be silly to do that. Then you are trying to fix the dream.
Yeah, and then you're making it real for yourself and the person.
Right.
You're giving it solidity in the mind.
That's right. Then you're forgetting it's a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bud, you want to go to some of the other questions?
So we've got, Joe has a question and then we can go to the hands. That'd be great.
Okay.
So what do you see as the most effective way to balance, teach, or explain the fact that this is all a dream with the reality that we are of inestimable value and worth to our Creator?
Right. So the dream self. So you're seeing on your Zoom screen, depictions of John, representations. These are representations of a self that is not the self that we are, is not, this thing that you're seeing. And so the fact that that we are in a dream and we're all characters in this dream, playing our roles in this dream, doesn't mean that the essential self is invaluable. The essential self is eternal. The essential self is the expression as an idea of God. And then we put on these costumes in the dream. And the dream itself, as I see it, my take on the dream that we're playing out on planet Earth is that we come to a recognition of who we are. We come to a recognition of our divinity. And then what we get to do in the dream is play with that and express it, so that the dream itself becomes not an expression of the illusion of the egoic mind, but it becomes a representation of the reality of love. So that the dream becomes like a masterpiece, if you will, a masterpiece of the imagination when it has aligned itself with love. And that, I believe, is the highest purpose of this world, is that it become, if it's a dream, it's never going to be real. So we're not going to make it reality. That's what the ego's been trying to do for a long time. It's try to make this dream a reality. It's not possible. But what the dream can be is a beautiful, symbolic representation of the reality.
The Course talks about this in terms of the happy dream. You can.
Yes.
It's a dream of awakening.
Yes.
I'm dreaming that I'm waking up, and as a part of that process, what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to extend love to all my brothers and sisters that I'm meeting within the context of the dream. I'm doing those kind of things which facilitate this process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not out of the dream, but there's a door over there, and I'm headed toward that. And one of the things I like to say, the foot is on the path. I am headed home. That's the good news. I'm not going into a nightmare here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm awakening from nightmare.
Right.
Yeah. Shall we go to the hands, bud?
Yeah, why don't we start with Jim? Jim was the first one to have his hand raised. So Jim, if you
Okay.
come off mute, we'd love to have you join us.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. I had a wonderful experience this morning in my interfaith community meditation time, and I was unexpectedly offered an awareness about the war in Ukraine and my part in it. And as John teaches us in this course that I do on Thursday about attack thoughts, I realized that my attack thoughts, even the unconscious attack thoughts, contribute as an interconnectedness to all of life, to this war. And I pulled up from my unconscious mind something that I really hadn't spent any time on is the Hawaiian prayer, the Ho'oponopono, whatever that is, about
You got it.
apologizing to the people in Ukraine. I am sorry for my impartness. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And it was very free. So thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Right on.
Hey, Jim. And then we have Lynn. Lynn, would you like to come off of mute and join us, please?
Namaste again, mighty companions. Oh, John, thank you as always. I love you. And thank you so much for bringing Patricia on.
Sure.
Oh, my goodness. I had the same reaction when I opened the Course in Miracles. I'm validated. I thought always, like, this is insane. This is insane what I've been living through. What it was for me is the insanity. And I wrote a poem just before this. I tried to do yoga, but then I got an urge for poem. And, but anyway, I'd like to read it. It goes perfectly, I think. I call it Lotus. Let us rise from the ashes, mighty companions. What has been burnt can live again. An aroma caresses what has been hurt. Grace is here as love remembers. Does caterpillar know its skin is not home? That he will open to colors not imagined. Lotus evolves in muck of insanity. Love embraces all of self.
I think it's really important to remember that. Thank you, Lynn, to remember that the lotus does come out of the muck. Sanity. It's really true. What's at the top matters. That's above the battlefield. Right. Thank you.
Lynn. Thank
Lynn.
you.
And next up is Tucker, who wrote a very long missive in our chat. I'd love to hear from you, Tucker. So if you can come off of mute and join us.
Okay, as John knows, I've been following the course for 25 years, and I had a cosmic connection to John. And now, all of a sudden, Patricia, might as well be a cosmic partner.
not?
Are you like 78 maybe, or in a chronological age?
Who are you talking to?
Patricia.
Oh, okay.
I am 63.
Oh, you're such a youngster. Oh no. So I was assuming that you were in my wife's class at East High School in Denver. And
Well, I take that as a compliment that I come across as having the wisdom of.
well, no, and so I assumed that then you went to Peace Corps Ecuador like in the 70s or something, right?
I was there 82 to 84. Actually.
Okay, so I was in Peace Corps Nepal in '67 as a way to get out of the Vietnam War. By that time, all men had to be conscribed to go to Vietnam and kill innocent people. So I chose to go to Peace Corps Nepal, and that was a sort of a cosmic connection. I had been heavily involved in anti-war activities at University of North Carolina, and involved a lot in the whole kind of cultural revolution that was happening then, taking a lot of LSD and psychedelics and marijuana. And so fast forwarding to now, my father was an Episcopalian minister who ended up at the Washington Cathedral, but he specialized in Phillips Brooks in Philadelphia. Was that the church that you were at, or?
I was at a Union church that's Presbyterian and UCC.
Oh, Presbyterian, yeah. So no,
Yeah.
Phillips Brooks, I guess, was Congregational and Episcopalian, but anyhow, so Dad grew up in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Sort of a blue blood. So there are all these things that are just we are together.
Beautiful.
Now, what you has experienced, I experienced in a lot of different forms. That I'm such a slow learner, as John might that I wouldn't realize that these things were happening to me while they happened. I was at Ramana Maharshi's ashram in Tiruvannamalai, and this woman, I spent 3 nights in her house, and it was like it was just overnight, and I went, oh, okay, but what's happened to me is that I've had several what I call dark nights of the soul, which a lot of people have talked about, that what Jesus' 40 days in the desert, and Buddha having to experience suffering, and that by being able to be conscious of those things, I am getting to a point here. So I am now, as John might realize, I was in Westport, Connecticut for a long time, but I had a series of prison sentences. So I was in prison for just like you said, but I was in for really bullshit reasons that were crazy. And I'm now in a very, very great assisted living place in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, a nursing home here called 60 West. And what I'm getting to is that every day there are total things that, as John has, I've tried to assess, and he's been a wonderful adjunct to my spiritual journey. I sort of feel like I'm a bodhisattva, an imposter bodhisattva, that every day things have happened here where I have to confront things. And right now, the confrontation that I'm having too is that so many people are right-wing GOP, enforcers of really stupid rules and stuff like that. And I go back into being I like to sort of like feel like I'm enlightened all of the time, and then all of a sudden I have this real world stuff. So for both you and John, it's kind of like how do you go on a lot of nice retreats. The New Mexico stuff sounds like a way to retreat, to get away from all. As I like to think of myself as confronting day to day things going on, I just
So how do we balance all that? Is that what you?
how exactly? I mean,
Okay, how do we balance that?
how to deal with people whose opinions and real life actions.
Maybe
like
we don't have to
Ukraine.
deal with it, Pat Tucker. Maybe we don't have to deal with it. Maybe that
Well,
feeling is just
I
in your
think we
mind.
do. I think if we want to be part of this, ancient aliens have been, we've been around for 20,000,
Wow.
40,000 years. But right now, if we want to save the human species, I think that we have to act, and it's not a question of retreating, as you just sort of said, John, that just don't have it in your thoughts to go.
Exactly. The whole point is what's going on in my head. What's going on in my mind, and how am I relating to it? And maybe I don't need to do a sort of direct confrontation, except within the context of my own mind, in terms of the way I see the world. And can I let people be who they are at the same time that I am who I am? That's what I'm. Do you understand, Patricia? What I'm?
Yeah, and I would. A couple of things came to my mind as you were speaking. Do you go by Tucker?
Tucker.
So a couple of things I was thinking about is, I think for me, one of the things that helps me is that I've done dream work for decades now. And when you're doing dream work, and if this is indeed a dream, one of the first principles of dream work is to know that everything that I'm experiencing here in this dream is part of me, and that it has shown up in my dream to help me.
Yeah.
To help me come to greater awareness.
Right.
So one thing that sometimes I do is I give thanks for this person who's I'm finding problematic, because they're here to be my teacher, and they're here to give me an opportunity to practice understanding and patience and compassion. So the first thing is to thank them for being here as my teacher, and for whatever part of me they are representing, and by doing so helping me know myself more fully. So that's part of it. And another thing that comes to my mind, and I think this is in one of the Choose Only Love books, channeled by Sebastian Blacksley, it talks about how it's what we're doing in the practice of acceptance is we are accepting all of our feelings and our thoughts. We're not trying to do battle with anything. So if I'm encountering somebody who's really pushing my buttons, to hold my own feelings in love, to hold my own aggravation in love, and to not do battle with myself or my own feelings.
There you go.
And that is then to be in right relationship with myself, which then enables me to be in right relationship with others.
Right.
So those are a couple of things that come to my mind. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's go on to Dean, in the interest of time. Dean?
Yeah, Dean, if you'd like to come off of mute and join us.
I'm off in more ways than one. But yes, thank you. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, John, for having this discussion. And thank you for everyone that's here. I hope that what I have to say is useful. And I think it's going to be just a reiteration, maybe in a different way of what's already been said. But I like to think, well, first of all, I want to thank Patricia for bringing up about her progressive community she left. I left a very progressive, mostly people who are disaffected with traditional religion community in Maryland. It's called Kitamakunda Community. Small, but very heartfelt community. And it did serve human needs. But now I see today that the theology was not a fit for me. And I had to leave. So thank you for that, because that's been a source of grief for me. John knows I'm emotional. And he actually
Thank
thanks
God.
me
I
for it.
love an emotional guy.
But I am so grateful for the sharing today. And I like to think of the world as a landmark refers to the all of it. And John, you spoke about eternity and being above the battlefield that's been discussed today. If I can hold the world as a field for healing, and then take my time to be quiet and see what's the appropriate
There you
action for me.
Mhm.
And like you say, then every upset is a gift. That person going on and driving me crazy is a gift because it's an opportunity for healing. But, you know, as they say, the world is loud and God speaks in whispers. So I think, you know, we need to take time for be quiet. No accident, Patricia, you had to go into the quiet, into the wilderness. And Jesus, into the
Oh,
wilderness,
yeah.
you know, where we don't know. We hold ourselves to the cloud of unknowing and put ourselves there deliberately, you know,
Mhm.
and receive the gift. And it may be that my act for healing of the war in Ukraine is to be kind to my wife,
There you
to
go.
to reconcile, you know, something, an upset between us. That may be my act for the world, okay? And
That's-
raise that level of consciousness, because that's the only thing that's going to heal the world is a rise in the level of consciousness. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dean. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dean. I so resonate with what you shared. Thank you. Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right. The way you heal the world is by loving your wife and everything around you, you know. The animals.
And sometimes that's not such an easy task.
Oh, well, you know, we got work to do. That's what we're here for. We're here to
And to
work.
hold it that we are eternal beings, that's also helped me to
Yeah.
know I don't have to get it done today, you know. I mean,
Right.
yes, there is, I do and I don't. You see what I'm saying? It's like there
Yeah.
is only now, but
That's right.
I don't know, just to hold it that way is also helpful.
And right now, I can make the right decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have to leave a little early. Sorry, I have a other course at 11.
Okay.
But
Go ahead,
thank
Bill.
you. I
Yeah.
enjoyed
Thanks for being with us. Yeah.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
Next up is Lisa. So Lisa, if you could please unmute, and we would like to add you to our discussion here.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for being here. Patricia, thank you for your book. There were so many times when I just said, yes, absolutely. It was really kind of revelatory for me too. And we were talking about, I love the discussion about turning the dream into the dream of awakening. That was beautiful. But I just wanted to say my favorite line in your book is in chapter 29. It says, we are the Christ we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
And that's the second coming, you know, we are it. And I have to tell you, at first I hated it, but today I love the fact that the Course makes us responsible. And, you know, because so many other religions make somebody else responsible. And we really did make a huge mistake in the beginning when we put Jesus over there and the rest of us over here. That was one of the things you said that really struck me. That was all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Lisa. Thank you.
You want to respond at all?
Well, I just appreciate. Thank you.
Yeah. Very good. You're absolutely right, Lisa. It's all to see what Jesus saw us, to do what Jesus did. That's the whole thing, right? Theodore, come on.
Ted, if you'd like to come off of mute, we would love to add you here to our discussion today.
Mute my. Okay,
You're
I
good.
have. Technology is not one of my great friends. Anyway, I figured it out. Yeah, I have to echo what everybody else that's spoken has said. This has been a absolutely call it a revelation of sort, or certainly a communication of something that goes beyond each individual face. Uh, and I really, I was a little bit skeptical at first about hearing from a person who said, what's the title of your book? Jesus?
No, Beyond Jesus.
Beyond Jesus.
Beyond Jesus. I thought, oh boy. But as you explained it, it is, yeah, it's right on. There's no question. And I want to thank you for everybody's sharing. It's just been a beautiful hour and a half or so. But what I guess a question, and I've been discussing this with some friends locally who are in a little Zoom group as well about the course. And we've been focused upon this question about the war. And one thing that I guess I'm puzzled by is this. The Course says, look on everything with love and it's all going to be all right. It's kind of like the Beatles, everything, just give a little bit of love and it's all going to be okay, everybody. But that doesn't seem to help the people that are dying in the trenches and, you know, in the buildings that are collapsing around them. The billionaires that are in their nice castles who are in, I've thought, God, if I were a billionaire, I would be in utter misery because I would be contributing to this whole total nightmare that's going on. So I guess the question that comes to me is, and it kind of hit me recently, the title of the course is A Course in Miracles, which means that, as I understand that, its fundamental teaching is not to teach you how to love. As a matter of fact, it said I can't teach you how to love. I can't teach you love. It says that right in the beginning.
Right.
Okay. All I can do is teach you the conditions which enable love to come forth, which is already there.
Right.
So that in relation to the Putin, I mean, I take the image of Putin, you know, I see this monster. I mean, I see him when I see his image on TV, I say, God, how can this person possibly do this? And with that, all kinds of negative things come, you know, I won't go through the gory details, but I see that that's not the response because I'm just meeting violence with violence in those
right.
gut feelings. So the question that comes to my mind is this: how does one give a miracle to Putin and all the players in this thing? Not just to make me feel good. That's a selfish thing. If I'm just doing it so I feel better. I mean, and I think there's a great temptation in the Course. I mean, it says, you know, I will bring you a happy dream. So I naturally want to gravitate towards a happy dream. God, let me get out of hell. So I guess the question is, and there was a lesson in the workbook that kind of resonated. It's lesson 121, which says, see your enemy. Get an image, hold an image of your enemy. So I hold Putin in my mind, okay? And see within him a little sliver of light. And then see that light expanding and encompassing him. And extending out and bringing it to see your friend now, my wife, my closest friend, see that person in that same light. Somehow I think that is, I don't know, to me is what it means to give a miracle. Because what I find when I do that,
Right.
I move into a state of peace a greater peace.
Mhm.
And I don't feel those negative, anti Putin feelings or anti-billionaire. Or I begin to feel, God, we're all brothers and
Oh, yeah.
sisters. We're all together. So that's, I don't know. Does that make any? Do you get this sense? I mean, because
Yes,
I
I got
guess
it.
I get the feeling of powerlessness if I just rest content by saying, okay, let everything be filled with love. I mean, that's a nice thing, but there seems to be, I need to do more.
I appreciate what you're saying about, the seeing the sliver of light. And I think that this is one of the things that we can do for each other, and Putin is included. When we cannot ourselves see our true nature, other people can stand in that for us, can hold that knowing for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is one of the things that we contribute to one another's process of awakening, if we want to use that word. So Putin is like an extreme, I see Putin as an extreme expression
Sure.
of something that exists within all of us. And there are no degrees of difficulty, right? So he's like an extreme expression, but is something that exists within all of us. So if I am able, and I'm going to practice this thanks to you, if I can stand in my own consciousness, in the awareness of Putin's divinity, of Putin's divine nature, if I can stand there, knowing that he doesn't know it.
Right.
He doesn't know his nature. But if I can stand in it on his behalf,
Uh-huh.
I think that is something that we can do for one another.
Right.
Because I know when I forget, somebody else can stand in that and believe in me when I'm not believing in myself. I do believe that makes a difference, that helps all of us along. So thank you for bringing that. And I'm going to work with that in my meditation prayer time.
If I could reflect on that too for a moment. I was talking earlier about a friend of mine, is Bob Durst, in case the name Bob Durst means anything to anybody, who became a serial killer, but he was at one point a roommate. And I could look at him and see this little boy this innocent little boy who got really twisted around in his mind and became angry and attacked the world in return for something he perceived as having been done to him. And now, can I see Putin as this little boy, this innocent little boy who's gone crazy and is doing all this, he's like all this destruction in the world. I mean, that's quite an effort to do, but that can be done. That can be done. It doesn't mean he still has to be stopped. We don't let children beat up other children, as I said earlier, right? But in the meantime, can I still see the innocence? That's the real question. Knowing that we all are. I mean, there's an interesting place in the Course where Jesus talks about Judas. And he says, unlike the whole tradition of the way we see Judas, Judas was my brother, and much as part of the sonship as you are or I am. Now that's the stretch. Can I go all the way? As much a part of the sonship as you are or I am? Wow, that's reaching out there. That's not the way the traditional Christian sees Judas. Not at all. Judas is somebody who goes to hell. The Course in Miracles, there is no hell. Nobody's going to hell. You're in hell right now in your mind. He's in hell right now in his mind, maybe, but that's not an eternal place. That's not where we live. That doesn't have to last forever. There is a forever, and we call it heaven. We got a couple other hands. Let's go to our couple of hands because we only have about 10 more minutes to go.
No worries. Next up will be Karen. Karen, if you could come off of mute, please, and join us.
Thank you. Thank you for having this Sunday with Monday, I've really, really enjoyed, and it helps clarify some of the things that I've gone through, and just to hear the sharing. But I just wanted to share that for me, with Putin and then even Trump, from my perspective or my projection, within the dream, they kind of make visible the function of the ego, and they're so extreme.
Yeah.
But powerful. I mean, and we see how people get sucked into it. So I don't really understand, if there's, I don't, I just know, I understand that we are dreaming. And then if we are, I know in a sleep dream, things that I remember that stand out are powerful and, colorful and dramatic and scary. And so that helps me to learn from these extreme manifestations. But then I also thought of the slave trader who ended up writing Amazing Grace after he woke up to the suffering he was causing. So there's always hope that these people will wake up also, because they are us. If we can do it, it can happen to them. And I don't understand how all this works. Obviously, it's so amazingly dynamic, but it's better than thinking, we're doomed to oligarchs and power mad people. So I just wanted to share that and say thank you to everyone.
Yeah, Karen, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because that's another way that I have approached Trump as well. I wrote a piece called "Donald Trump, Your Spiritual Teacher in Disguise," that got a lot of traction. And I really was talking about Trump as a dream figure in this dream, helping us see this is what the ego mind looks like. This is how the ego mind thinks. This is how the ego mind behaves. So that I can see it in myself. And by amplifying that pattern for me, then I have a greater awareness to see it in myself, even if it's a more subtle expression of it. But it's a way for me to do that, as we talked about before, like that clearing out, that purification. And the other thing about these figures are, in the dream, they're powerful. But in reality, these figures are completely impotent. The egoic expression is completely impotent. So that's the funny nature of it, because in the dream, they assume these positions of tremendous power, but it's a dream power. It's an illusory power. It's not real power. And I remember there's a story of the Buddha who, I'm going to totally paraphrase this because I don't remember the details, but someone came up to him and was going to, kill him. And the Buddha said, fine, but after you kill me, go, give life to something, right? I don't know what it was. But the Buddha's point was, it's easy to destroy. That's not power. Power is that which brings forth life. So all of these expressions, all of these egoic expressions that are destructive and seem to, take away life, are actually not true power.
Right.
The expression of domination and force in the dream, but they're not actually power.
Right.
So thank you, Karen, for bringing that up again, because Power versus Force, that's a great book. Thanks for bringing that up, bringing that back to my awareness.
Sometimes we talk about dreaming, and it's sort of funny when your dreams come true and you think about what your dreams are.
Maybe not, right?
A lot of time that's insanity.
Yeah.
It's like one fun story I like to tell is a friend who had a dream he was going to get a dream car, a very, very expensive sports car. And he finally gets enough money and everything to get it. And then he gets it and he thinks, what have I got? I've got $700 a month payments for the next 500 years.
I've imprisoned myself.
I just put myself in prison, right?
Yeah,
all for the dream, right? Just to make the dream come true, right?
Yeah.
Let's go to Nancy.
Thank you, Karen. Uh,
Can you hear me?
yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's about, this is what I've learned basically recently, what are the realizations from listening. I'm just part of John's, this 6-week thing that he's talking about, Jesus in the parables in the course. Anyway, this goes back to when I was a child, maybe 6 or 7 or something. The way I was raised and my living conditions and everything were not the best. But anyways, I remember I don't remember what happened, but all I remember was saying, thinking, I couldn't do anything physically in the world, but could I do something with my mind? Can my mind change anything or whatever? And immediately said, the power of my mind, I was thinking. And of course I said, of course not. That was when I was like 6 or 7, right? Now I'm 79, well, anyway. But anyways, and so if it takes a lifetime to wake up, fine, that's okay.
Yeah, that's right.
To wake up, right? But the things I know now are, it's one mind. We're only one mind. There's only one. It's the mind of God. And a miracle is a shift in perception, a shift in the thinking, perception. And what you said, or somebody said, I applied this to my brother, which is my real brother, see him as the Christ. And while I was doing, because you can only have one thought in your mind at a time. So, and then when I did that, it's like all of the anger and resentment and everything disappeared. And it continues. That's like, when I think of my brother, I see him as the little, like you said, see him as the little boy, see him as the Christ, and all the other stuff is gone. And to me, that's what a miracle is. And the other thing is, since we're all one part of the one mind, I can do my effect, I can affect the thinking of that one mind. I can, from my thoughts, I can change my thoughts, and I can affect. But it's going to take more of us to do that. But for my part, I can do that. That's what I can do. That's all I can do. But I can't do anything in the physical world, basically. Which is anyway. That's all I'm going to say. I tend to go on and on, but
that's the same thing that Dean was saying just a moment ago. But that what he can do is he can love his wife.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how change the flow, the energy or something.
All right.
So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're really very near the end of our time, but Patricia, I'll give you the last couple of minutes here to share whatever has come out of this for you or whatever you're thinking about.
Well, I'm just very grateful to have had this conversation and for all of the comments and questions. It's been really wonderful being part of this sort of ad hoc community. And, I'm coming away with from this experience very enriched and grateful. And I also want to let people know that in May, the tables are going to be turned, and I'm probably I'll be interviewing you, John, when you are with the Center for Contemporary Mysticism, which is based here in Philadelphia, and you'll be our guest.
The tables were turned a little.
And, and the roles will be reversed. So just want to let people know that they can register for that at contemporarymysticism.org. So I look forward to continuing this conversation with you in whatever form it wants to take at that point. So I'm just very grateful to you, John, and Bud, and for everybody who's here.
I think it's interesting the way things have evolved over time. Both of us, as former ministers, I've had to step out of the pulpit. At the same time that I stepped out of the pulpit, I stepped out of the local church. All of a sudden, the congregation is a different congregation. It's a bigger congregation in many ways. It's their ears are a little bit more open and a little bit more willing to hear, for example, the message of the Course, and that we can bring this out and share this together. So Sundays are different than they used to be, but actually they're more meaningful than ever. And I'm really grateful for folks like you and come on, and for the help of Bud and for all of you who are sharing.
Can I ask one other thing, John? While I this is Tucker again, and
okay.
I have one burning little thing that came up. I don't know. It's probably a flash like Patricia had in her thing, but I can't help but notice throughout history that we've had the need to create the devil, the other self. Even Carl Jung talked about the shadow self, and stuff like that. And I'm just interested in how we, and maybe you can ask that of John when in. I'm going to register for that thing if I can. But what is it that makes us? Is it our ego functions that makes us create a devil force, an opposition thing, a fallen angel, whatever we want to call it, that makes us want to personify. I guess I'm answering my own question. Personify evil.
I got it. Good question. You want to address that? And then Patricia, never at the end of our time, we're going to say goodbye.
Well, I think the devil is as Tucker says, it's a shadow figure. I think it's a product of the dualistic mind that splits things into good and evil. And if you have the concept of evil, then the mind creates some sort of embodiment or depiction of that, which turns out to be the devil. So I think when you're operating in a dualistic paradigm like that, a devil figure is inevitable. And so we will either have our sort of archetypal devils, or we will project that devil role onto people like Putin or Donald Trump or whoever. But as long as we're operating from the dualistic paradigm of good versus evil, we will have the devil in some kind of form.
Let me say in closing too that I'm convinced that despite what's going on, there's a raising in consciousness that's going on. Yep. That we are definitely expanding beyond where we used to be. Part of that can be seen in terms of the depth of the church. We are getting these deeper ways of seeing. I think when we left Afghanistan, I thought, oh, this is so great. Oh, we finally stopped war. And I wrote a piece after that, I'm not going to study war no more. And well, then a few months later, everything changes. But there is one thing that's different about the current war than other wars. It's on television every day in front of you, and people see it. It's like real resistance to Vietnam didn't happen until people started seeing it on the evening news. And that was just like half an hour on the evening news.
And everybody's got their iPhones.
Everybody's got their iPhones. So
everybody is a journalist now. And I've talked about people who follow me are probably tired of me saying this, right. But we are in the time of COVID, right? And COVID, if you think about that word COVID, if you break it down, if it were a word in Latin, it would mean to see together. Because the prefix co means together, and vid, like video, means to see.
Right.
So we are in this time right now where we are seeing together, and we are seeing the effects of the dualistic mind. We are seeing it in the Black Lives Matter. We are seeing the Me Too. We are seeing it now in the obsolescence of war. We are seeing things now differently. And I totally agree with you, John. We are, even though it looks like we're just going the wrong direction, I do believe that it is because we are in this process of awakening that the egoic mind is playing out its drama in a very tumultuous, cathartic way.
Right.
And I've likened it to a star that goes supernova. When it has spent its fuel, it explodes in this flash of light before it's done.
Right.
And that's what I see happening right now with the story.
So it's exciting because what we have is a holistic improvement in the consciousness of the whole planet, and not something that's happening in a war between two countries in Africa or something like that.
Right.
Well, it's 5 after, and thank you, Patricia. And
Thank you,
look
John.
forward to
Thank you, everybody.
turning the tables in May, and thank you all for being here. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Carol Howell, who's been doing a lot of work with the Course in Miracles for quite a long time, and knew Bill Thetford very well, and we'll be sharing some of her thoughts about that. We'd like to end with someone reading the Lord's Prayer from A Course in Miracles. Bobby's not with us, is she?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Bobby,
All right. Okay.
yours.
Well, wow, what a conversation about our illusions. And this beautiful prayer is just so much about that. And it's a privilege to sing it. Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions, and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given, and accept but this into the minds which you created and which you love. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much, Bobby.
Thank you.
Let's go to our gallery view to say goodbye.